Here on the Echo Ratings Eventing podcast, we have teamed up with our great friends at Bedmax, along with our very own Spike the Vet, to give you guys, our lovely listeners, some tip-top tips on how to keep your horses happy and healthy in a stable environment. So, Spike, what have you got for us to get us started?
Well, here we are. Tip-top tips. And it's so important to reduce our risk of respiratory disease. Using a bedding with the lowest possible dust rating, such as Bedmax, is the absolute cornerstone to ensure a happy and healthy respiratory environment for a horse. Along with that, a really well-ventilated, stable environment so that we can maximize that clean air for the horse in the area where it's breathing as well. So in the corners, and it is criminal how many stables I go to, and these would be in very professional yards where we still see cobwebs, dust, all kinds of things in those corners around water drinkers, around feeding bowls, feeding troughs, hay bars, all these sort of things. And it's so important that we make sure that that's a better environment for them.
So not only a good quality bedding, but also you've got to whip out your feather duster or your Henry Hoover and make sure you get in all the nooks and crannies.
Or you got to get your feather duster out, otherwise I'll get my white gloves and I'll be checking out for how much dust there is. But seriously, it's very important, and it is unbelievable how often it's overlooked.
There you go, listeners. A tip-top tip for you from our very own Spike the Vet, courtesy of our lovely friends at Bedmax.
Thank you, Nicole, and look forward to coming back with some more tip-top tips.
Welcome to the Echo Ratings Eventing podcast and a When Nicole Met show, very kindly supported by our friends at Bedmax. Now, listeners, have we got a treat in store for you? Because the guest on today's show is a lady who has not only ridden at the top level, she has owned a horse at the very top level, the very, very top of the top level, I should say. She's trained to the very top of the sport as well. She is one of the most recognised coaches on British soil. It is none other than Caroline Moore. Caroline, welcome to the show.
Hi, Nicole. Thank you very much for inviting me.
It is our absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And I'm very much looking forward to kind of digging into your backstory, because there's all sorts that we can go down. And listeners, we are going to go into lots of it, because there's obviously the riding career, there's the coaching career, there's the owning a top level event horse as well. The list is endless. I think let's start with the riding, because that's really where it all began for you. You've ridden up to the very top level of the sport, 5-star level. I think you've rode at the Hong Kong test event back in 2007 as well. Just absolutely extraordinary. So what was your earliest memory of horses, and were they always something that you wanted to pursue as a huge part of your life? Was it love at first sight?
It actually was. I mean, I come from a seaside town on the East Coast, from a complete non-horsey background. So I'm sort of first generation horses as such. And it literally probably was the age of 12 when my one neighbour, her parents bought her a pony, and I went up to riding school with her. And literally, it was from there on in that, I mean, I'm quite a passionate person. As soon as I find something that I love, I sort of follow anyway. But I just fell in love with the smell, the feel, the touch, the whole thing about horses, or ponies at the time. And yes, it just took me fairly by storm. And it was one of those things that as soon as it sort of happened to me, all I wanted to do was, to my parents' disgust, was horses. And right from there on in, I think I left school when I was 16, which is unheard of nowadays, straight after what were O-levels. And I went to work at a riding school come show centre in Newark. I mean, that was the first time I'd ever sort of really worked with horses, apart from at the riding school. And that was a great place. I worked for Willie and Linda Young at the Newark Equestrian Centre, and they ran a lot of shows. So alongside, I mean, I went there really to learn how to teach people to ride horses, and to start off on the coaching scene myself. So that actually came way before the thought of being a rider. So I went up through that side. I got really into jumping because that was the first and foremost that I enjoyed. And the sort of show centre side of it. I learned how to, look at courses, design courses, build courses, and that sort of thing. And then coaching was always predominantly where I was really interested in. I went right through the BHS route. I worked in different places to coaching. I actually took a place on when I was 18 and ran it as my own business. It was a riding school come livery yard. So it's not really where you'd expect sort of a rider to come from. So coaching was always in my heart of hearts to start with.
Honestly, I love hearing stories, and I know our listeners do too, of people that haven't come from sort of a really horsey background. I think it gives a lot of hope, and it's very inspiring for people that actually it is possible to get to the top of the sport without having had any sort of backing and experience in your young years. What did your parents think? Because that's you say you were 12 when you fell in love with ponies and horses. So 4 years to leaving school, another 6 years to running your own business.
Yeah,
that's quite a steep trajectory.
My parents thankfully allowed me to follow my love. They weren't keen on it, and I think they just hoped I would grow out of it, like probably every parent of the child that wants to do horses in inverted commas sort of wants. But I think I keep saying I'm a bit passionate about things, but once I'd set my sights and where I very, very first started, they sort of gave me this, this is your BHSAI, this is where your first main goal is. And I looked way beyond that to the fellowship and thought, that's the top of where I want to be. And, I'm going to work towards that. And that was really one thing after another. I just wanted to just up myself all the time and get to, keep performing at what I could do at the highest level. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the people, and I enjoyed learning, and I enjoyed working with horses, and I was just in my absolute element. I did a very short period of time lecturing at a college. When I say a short period of time, I think it was a couple of years. And then realised that absolutely wasn't for me. It was a lot of it was indoors, and I really didn't enjoy it at all.
I find it fascinating that the coaching came first, and that was always something that you really loved and were passionate about from a very young age. Because quite often, we see a number of top professional coaches and people who are hugely experienced, and for them the sort of the riding side of things has come first, and actually the coaching has been a natural progression from that. So it's a different dynamic, that actually the coaching was something that you were initially really passionate about. Did that affect, do you think, looking back, how you approached the start of your riding career, simply because you looked at things with a more analytical mind, perhaps?
I think, yes, I think you're probably absolutely right there. I think when you ride, but you're actually a coach that works with other people as well, you are always self-critiquing, and you're thinking a little bit more about what's happening a bit more underneath you. But I think the coaching and the riding throughout my career was very 50%. So after moving away from lecturing, I straight away went into a yard with it was with an ex-student, and we rented the yard, and we used it. I think we had 25 boxes, a really nice surface, and between us we produced young horses, we competed ourselves, we both coached, and we worked together. But it was still very 50-50. So we were both probably riding about 6 or 7 horses a day, and both coaching as well. At all levels, the younger riders and also more older, more mature riders. But I think when you look at the way sort of as you move through the coaching, you start gaining riders that are starting to move up the level, and then it becomes very, very exciting. I'll talk in a moment or two, but later on in my career, I got very, very more in depth about how we take a rider's performance and break it down into tiny little areas to make big, big improvements. And at the beginning, that was a little bit unheard of, but I think it was around about 2005, I think, that I started working with, there was 4 or 5 others of us. We started working with Yogi Breisner. We actually all applied for a youth performance coach's job, and we were the guys that actually didn't get the position. And Yogi recognised there was a bunch of coaches that really wanted to move forward, with their careers. And he set it was called the Coaching Development Team Up. And basically, Yogi and the late Kenneth Clawson mentored us. And we did masses of things like we did public speaking, we coached in front of each other, we did media training. And we got to work work with, but we got to meet and listen to people like Sir Clive Woodward, who at the time, it was a new era of coaching. So that's a really big breakthrough time when things started to change a little bit, and we started profiling riders and looking at tiny little areas. And then, Nicole, it got really, really, really exciting coaching, because you could suddenly see massive improvements in riders because we were changing our techniques a bit as coaches. And it's still, really exciting today. Everything moves on. I spent the morning today with Corinne Bracken and Mandy Frost, and we just instigated a morning together in an indoor school with a couple of really good riders, and just sat down and thrashed out some coaching philosophies, and we looked at different techniques. And just doing things like that is really, really exciting, because all of a sudden you see masses of improvement. And as I say, it's very exciting.
When you say masses of improvement, is that masses of improvement in the people that you're coaching, or in the way in which you are coaching? Are you almost developing yourselves as part, and the byproduct is that the people that you're working with are improving?
I think, yes, absolutely both. When I say masses of improvement, I think we took 3 horses today, and with 3 sort of, I call sort of great minds sort of working together, we tuned little tiny things, but then all of a sudden the horse started jumping straighter, the horse started using its back, the canter improved, and those riders went home with, lots of things to work with, lots of tools, a different feel. And all we did was took little tiny snippets from each of us just working together. So I would say we all, improved our sort of vocabulary, ready for the next time. It's things like that you have to really go out of your way to do to gain that bit extra, I think.
It's interesting, isn't it? They're the kinds of things that actually you look at riders competing at the very top level, and they're the sort of things that they'll be looking to do on a regular basis, those really sort of little marginal gains. And actually, it's exactly the same for you in a coaching capacity of what way of explaining something, what extra angle of looking at something just expands and makes that extra little push forwards, and it just builds and builds and builds the bigger picture. And I think it comes back to the passion for coaching, which I think is very clear, was kind of running through you from an early age. I'm really interested by the mention of sort of people like Sir Clive Woodward, who in 2005 would have been really prolific. England won the Rugby World Cup in 2003. So would have been really at a peak of a new era of coaching within sport. Is that something you still do today, is cross-reference with other sports and how they do things?
Very, very much so. Looking at, we can look at team sports like rugby and and football and things like that, and work out, how the team dynamics work together. I know our sport isn't a team sport, but it's the little tiny extra things, and the technical side of it is all obviously completely different. I think it boils down to having a really good process or system, and it's really good fun to go into different sports and look at their systems and how they work and how meticulous they are. I mean, everything is built on good quality practice. It's good practice rather than poor practice. So if we as riders can recognise what good practice is and eradicate, poor practice, you can take, I call them the boring bay geldings. You can take any bay gelding, that's Mr. Average, and turn him into a championship horse, because all you've got to do is train him to have a skill, and then make sure it's of a good quality, and practice and practice and practice until it's second nature to him. And then in competition, it should feel fairly easy. And I know that sounds like I'm being a little bit, God, come on, Caroline.
No, I know what you mean. It's almost like that sort of, it sounds very simple, almost blasé, but actually you kind of have to break it down. Because if you look at the bigger picture and think, how do I get to a 5-star or a world championship or whatever it may be, it actually feels very overwhelming and very complicated. Does that tie in now? Because you would be a big advocate for simulated cross country, which we've seen a huge amount more of in the last few years, I think it would be fair to say. That's something you're very passionate about, and I know that you do a lot with your riders. Is that where that comes in as well, that sort of second nature feel that they'll get out on course and it'll be almost instant that they'll understand the question?
I think, yes. I mean, when we coach cross country, obviously, what we want in competition is the speed, and you're on grass and it's completely different. But the designers nowadays, they have pushed the boundaries so much so that you have got to be able to hold your line. The horse has got to understand the question. And the more you practice the horse to coming down to a fence or a line of fences, that he can prick his ears, read it, understand it, and be confident about it, the more you can practice that, the better. So often if you walked into my arena at home, it would look a little bit like a playground, because I'd have a fair amount of show jumps out. They'd be on slightly different lines. It might not be a full track. There'll be some cross-country fences, generally fairly solid ones that I've got at the moment. I've got some, I generally mainly use solid fences, but also the Jump for Joy fences are fantastic for the younger horses when you first start them off, because they're very non-threatening. They can brush through them, they can knock them over. I train masses of going through flags and narrow areas until horses feel really comfortable with that sort of claustrophobic feeling of going past something that's quite close to their eye. And once they know that it's actually quite good fun and they get rewarded and there's a release of the pressure, they're really keen to do it. So, yeah, I really advocate that type of training. I mean, I think it's so important that the horse can read something and want to go through the flags. So yes, definitely.
And where did the passion for the youth programs come in? So it was 2005, I think you said, that you first applied for a youth coaching position.
Uh-huh.
So where did the kind of desire to train younger riders come from? And was that simply circumstantial at the time? It's something that you've been instrumental in the kind of the early parts of the careers of lots and lots of top young riders today. Was that always something that was a passion, or was that moment in time that actually was a bit of a crossroads for you?
I think, like all young coaches nowadays, they start off at Pony Club, and I had a great time coaching through the Pony Club, probably in the first sort of 5-6 years of my coaching career, after I sort of left the riding school type of thing. And actually I'd got a yard. I got so excited about areas and teams and championships. And, it's something that we absolutely lived for. And even to the extent, actually, that, yes, I rode in the test event in 2007. And actually, when you do something like that, you get taken out as exactly what the riders and the owners would get to do the following year in the real event. So you get taken out 2 weeks beforehand, and you get a chance to sightsee and see around everything. And I took a late flight of 5 days later than everybody else going out there, just purely because of the area championships with the Pony Club. And that became more important to me than sightseeing in Hong Kong, which people thought I was a bit daft about. But that really was everything that, we were dreaming about, was winning the area championships. I know that sounds a little bit daft now, but it's anybody that's coming up through the levels of coaching. Your training ground is the Pony Club, and then the under 18. So that's where it came from. And then I started working with a girl called Emily Parker, and actually just as I moved into selecting at that point, and yes, she won a couple of gold medals. She won individual gold and team gold. I think it was Pardubice, on her little horse called Treefers. And I mean, that really got me hungry for medals. And all I wanted to do at that point was find a way where I could work with youth and instill knowledge, but move through to taking them through to a championship. And it always sounds, very sort of far away for a rider to here I am now and winning a gold medal. But it really isn't, but you've just got to make yourself better than all of the rest. And it's a really good, fun journey. And if you can make the riders believe in it, it really can happen. And that's where I sort of got very, very hungry for it. And then as a young rider selector, I sort of paid my own way and went out to the championships and learned so much from that experience. I think I probably went out for 3 or 4 young rider championships. And just sort of learning about how the riders controlled their nerves and just the atmosphere and everything else that went around the whole championship circle. I learned just so much. I was very grateful to Alex Cahoon to actually allow me to go out and just shadow and see all of that. So when a position came up for a youth coach with the juniors in 2010, I sort of jumped at it because that's really where I wanted to be and what I enjoyed doing.
So that would have been in around 2010 that you were sort of came on board as coaching. But in 2008, I think it was, you achieved essentially your life ambition of becoming a British Horse Society fellow or a fellow of the British Horse Society, which, I mean, for anybody that doesn't know, this is essentially the ultimate equestrian professional qualification as such, and real recognition. I think there's less than 80 people globally that hold this, and the likes of Carl Hester, Ian Stark, Yogi Breisner, Ferdy Eilberg, William Micklem. I mean, the list is extremely select. So in 2008, you achieved that. What did it mean to you to actually have that on your CV? Was there a feeling of relief? Was there a feeling of elation? What did it mean?
I think relief is a big thing, Nicole, because you work, although you don't train for anything like that, it's just years of experience. Certainly there's a lot of pressure building up to it. So you perform on the day and, just getting your head into answering questions correctly, speaking correctly, all of the background of what's happening in the industry at the time. And I mean, everything is covered right from history, from sort of the 18th century and things like that to, what's happening up to today and everything that's going on, as well as the riding and the coaching side of it. So it's a massive exam. It's exhausting. It takes a couple of days to do. And myself and Nick Turner sort of said, right, let's get cracking. And both of us did it in the horse trial specialist, the eventing specialist. And we had a good 2 days, actually. But yes, a complete relief. But also, it's like anything. When you have a sense of achievement of something that you've always had in the sort of, the forefront of your mind, where you're trying to go. It was like a building block step. That's where I am, and now let's move on again. But yes, it was a great time to get that under my belt as such.
And what about then the journey into the youth programmes? Because you've been a stalwart as part of the British Eventing youth coaching programmes over the last 10, 12 years.
Correct, yeah.
You have worked with some exceptional young riders coming through those age groups, the likes of, I'm trying desperately to calculate riders' ages within my head now, listeners. But you would have seen, the ones most recognisable today, you've got the likes of Heidi Coy, who you work really closely with, Bobby Upton. The list is extensive. Uh-huh. Is there a moment within that period of coaching that you are most proud of?
I think there's no particular time. Medal winning is always good, and especially the riders that you've worked alongside right from the word go, like as you say, Heidi. But that, I think, when you take rider championships, they are there because they put their absolute all into it. They're not necessarily privileged riders, some of them. In fact, one year I think it was Monte Libretti, we took such a range of riders. One rider that had only pretty much ever ridden her own horse all of her life. She'd had lack of experience on lots of other horses. To riders that Emily King and from one end to the other. But you are so proud of all of them because they all knuckle together and back up each other. But I'm not going to say that there's any particular proud moment, but working with all of them, it is such good fun because you get the emotions, you get the highs and the lows, but it is the best fun ever. And as far as a coach goes, I would encourage any coach to really strive to become a team coach, because it's very much on the horizon. Things are changing and things are moving up forward. I would really strive for it. Yeah.
There's a real different dynamic as well, isn't there? It's not only the best performance from each individual competitor, but ultimately kind of looking towards the bigger picture, what is best for the team as well. At that age group is interesting as well, because there's some riders that actually by the time they get to young riders have had a huge amount of team experience through ponies, juniors, young riders, whatever it may be. There's others who are less experienced. But how much is there a sort of a feeling of actually you're able to give them a real life skill, and it's life coaching as well as coaching on a level that is obviously elite performance, that it's being able to mentally cope with that pressure and to make those split-second decisions under extreme pressure? I
think you're absolutely right. I think there's such responsibility, or they feel there's such responsibility on them to ride for their country, and they take it upon their shoulders. But from the coach's point of view, and all the other support staff as well, it's our job to get them so well prepared, along with their home coaches, that when they get there, that the pressure a little bit is off. So they don't make any mistakes because they're nervous. They start to become a little bit incoherent. So, I think the whole thing about it is the preparation leading up to a championship. So when they get there, they feel so relaxed in their state of mind because they've got a good system. They know that people are there to back them up, and everything is so well prepared that it should run more or less like clockwork. It's not easy at all, but it's a huge responsibility that they take upon their shoulders. And I would say it's not so much the riders that struggle with that. It's more the parents and the parental pressure that you have at a championship like that. And again, it's our job to try and to prevent any nerves coming from the parents and filtering through to the riders, because that can have quite a detrimental effect.
Was it ever something the team aspect is obviously something that's kind of been woven into you through a coaching perspective. Was it ever something that you really, really seriously wanted to pursue as a rider? Or was it only ever really the coaching side of it that actually drove you to that kind of elite performance edge?
Yes, I mean, I knew then what I know now as a coach. If I could put that back into me as a rider back then, and I think I would have had a slightly different riding career. But I remember years ago, I was sat on my mum and dad's bed, just literally, and this memory is stuck in me. And I remember flicking through and showing these brochures to my parents, saying, "This is what I want to do. I want to go to Waterstock. I want to go to the Yorkshire Riding Centre." And we just could not afford it at all. So it sort of almost was like a stop right there, Caroline. And I went down a different route. And then as I got into the riding and the eventing later on, I mean, my first horse at 4-star level, now 5-star level, was given to me to ride. I think he'd been eliminated about 11 times at what was pre-novice level because he wouldn't have water and he was a really nappy horse. And that was the first horse I took through the levels up to Burley. And the only other horse I had at top level was one that was left to me in a will from Vanessa Lloyd Davis, Don Giovanni. And he'd been around a few 4-stars and he was a great, great horse. But he was the most untidiest show jumper. And, you know, I was thrilled to have 3 fences down. I mean, that's unheard of nowadays. But those were the 2 horses that I had and were working with. And it was slightly different then. You're talking sort of 15 years ago. But yes, it's. I would have loved, and if I had my time again, it would be different again. But I get more enjoyment now from the coaching more than anything. Yeah, especially working with some of the riders that I work with. They're so inspiring, and every day is a learning day for me. I learn so much from each different rider. I think that's a real key thing as a coach.
What would you tell young Caroline or a young person looking to make their way in the sport today?
Well, the first thing, they've got to have some form of business to back up their career. It's so important because it's a very, very expensive sport. So I think rather than just looking through the rose-tinted glasses at wanting to become a rider, I think they've got to look at the whole picture, the whole system that they want to work within, and they've got to have some form of backup, whether it's coaching, whether it's working outside of the industry, and being really realistic on the budget side of it. So that's that side of it. That is really, really important because you can't survive without it. But secondly to that, follow your heart as where you want to go and learn from other people. Don't think twice about going and shadowing people and ringing a top rider up that would be your role model and saying, "Do you mind if I just come and pick poles up for you for 2 days and just watch how you train and gain from other people?" And I think that's really, really important because we can get a little bit sort of blinkered in our own way that we ride and coach and do things. And it's great to actually watch other people and just question other people's beliefs and where they're coming from a little bit. I think that's probably the best advice is keep everything open-minded and learn from other people.
I think that's very good advice, actually. And I think it's advice that you actually, I mean, you said it a short while ago, that you put into practice yourself, because that's exactly what you've been doing today, of kind of being open-minded, discussing it, talking to other people, getting other ideas, other opinions, and looking at the bigger picture as such. If we step away from the coaching for a second. Another facet of your eventing journey over the years is that of an owner, because All-Star B, the late and the great All-Star B, who went on to win a World Championship title with Ros Cantor in Tryon in 2018, has been a huge part of your eventing journey. So where did he first make his way into your ownership, and what was your first impression of him?
Well, I went to see some horses at Veer Phillips, and he was actually the first one I looked and sat on, and I didn't actually bother looking at the others. And what I just absolutely loved about him was his spring off the ground. He'd not the nicest of contacts. He was a little bit hollow, didn't really move very well. He was a little bit one-sided and wooden. But, I canted him down to a metre 30 set of planks, and he just gave it room, but didn't hang in the air. He just absolutely gave you such a lovely feeling down to a fence. And, I pretty much bought him there and then, really. And he had done a little tiny bit of jumping prior to me having him, just with Veer. And so then I did a little bit with him. I did his 100, some novices, and it was that point that I got the role as the youth performance coach. So straight away, I think that's when I said, right, I'm going to step away from competitive riding and focus on my coaching career a little bit more. And at the time, Emily was, I was working quite a lot with Emily Parker. So she took the ride over with Albie up to about intermediate level, and then moved off to Scotland. And I quietly wanted him to stay a little bit more where I could work with him a little bit as well. So he came back to me, and I just started working with Ros probably a year or so before. And sort of went on from there, really.
So originally, when you first bought him, it was an idea, he was a horse for you to ride. Was that the plan, or?
It was the plan, but yes, yeah. As I say, I stopped that as soon as I took this coach's job on. I decided, because also I was getting busier and busier with my coaching. I decided that I was going to stop that, really.
Was there ever a moment, looking back now, knowing everything that he achieved, was there ever a moment that you thought, what if?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I do think about it. Yes, definitely. But I think he had the best opportunity with Ros, and no, I absolutely. It's quite a tug on the heartstrings a little bit, but I love working with him. I love working with Ros, and I was good with it, definitely.
It's one of those things, isn't it? It's very easy to look back on it now and say, oh, what if?
Yeah.
But actually, it's sort of with a fanciful thought and how differently could it have played out? Nobody will ever know. It's looking back, isn't it, in hindsight? So you'd started working with Ros for a year or so already to this point. What was your first impression of Ros? This was an early part of her career. She'd been making a lot of sort of marks on the producing of young horses scene. She'd had a great sort of foundation through the likes of Judy Bradwell. What was your first impression of her?
So straight away, I loved working with Ros because she questioned everything. She's exceptionally meticulous, and she always has been, and quite self-critiquing, almost at the very early stages, probably too much. But we bounced off each other so well, and I would say pretty much quite early on thrived on each other's enthusiasm for really getting things right. And I'm still learning all of the time, and we all have to keep making little improvements here and there. And she absolutely was so thirsty for knowledge and wanting to take things further, and absolutely great to work with. Really enjoyed it.
And did you believe when that partnership was sort of first put together of Ros and All Star B. Did you think at that moment that actually, it could be a 5-star combination, let alone a combination that would go on to, win multiple medals on the British team and ultimately that individual title? Did you really feel at that moment they were destined for the very top together?
Certainly very confident that the partnership would go 5-star through the grades, as any horse rider would do, definitely. Because he's so scopy, he was so scopy, and he was that type of horse. Sort of through the mid part of his career, sort of his 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old career, which when Ros really started with him, he was really fairly difficult in the way he moved on the flat. His biomechanics. He was still growing, and he rarely ever had a lame step in his life. But I don't think he found it really easy to move. In his mechanics and everything very early on, he found sitting very, very difficult. So we had to really back off his flat work and just, and rather than ask, we had to really let him develop. We had to be almost quite comfortable with him not really scoring sort of very high in the dressage, but as he went up through his levels, we started to ask a little bit more. Ian Woodhead was really instrumental in Albie's career on the flat, really, because he allowed him to develop. He trained him very, very classically correctly. At the time, Ros was just starting to work with Ian. And again, she's just so thirsty for knowledge at that point. She learned so much from him. But it was at the time when we started to ask him to really start to carry himself in a different way and started to put almost a little bit of passage work into him that he started to really enjoy coming up through the withers, and he started to change the way he worked a little bit. And that's when his marks started to change. But that really wasn't until his 11th, maybe 12th year. And it goes with any big horse. It just takes such a time to take them through that sort of level of strength to get, that sort of carriage, especially when they start off a little bit. He wasn't wooden. He was just very difficult through his mechanical movement. He struggled a little bit. So we just took it very slowly with him, didn't ask over much, but it paid off in the long run, and he really started to enjoy working correctly.
How was the dynamic of obviously coaching a horse that you own, owning, kind of discovering that or planning that path with him, because that's obviously something that you were really interested in anyway, the kind of the bigger picture as such. It's not just going into a lesson and teaching somebody something in an hour. It's the bigger picture as well. How was the whole dynamic in kind of finding that rhythm? Did you get very nervous, or did it all feel quite natural?
I sort of treated Albie, although he was 50% mine, I treated him as one of Ros's other horses. So when we came to planning his season planning, his 4-year plan ahead sort of thing and things like that, we just talked about him as any horse, an owner's horse, rather than our own horse. So I got as nervous for Ros on the third day than Shearer or any other horse as I would Albie. So that I sort of took my owner's hat off. I think my owner's hat really only came on when it comes to the bank account and paying bills. I honestly treated him as any other horse with Ros, and I think that's really important, because then Ros knew there was no favoritism when we thought about planning where we was going. It was always keeping the proper good forward plan in the forefront of our mind rather than just thinking about All Star B. So he came into the whole plan of the whole yard of horses. So, but as far as nerves go on, the final aspect of seeing him in competition, I think it's like anything. You just so willing things to go well. I just can't watch.
I think that's a really key point. What about those sort of really, really big moments? Because he gave you plenty of them. I think for me, one of my favourite sort of All-Star B moments with Ros was probably the Europeans in Stragom in 2017, when he, I think, wouldn't really have suited the type of cross-country track it was. It felt very much like a race track. It was very twisty. It was very turny. He was a big horse. Ros is, very, very petite and tiny. And yet actually it felt like their cross-country round there was a moment that as a watching member of the public, essentially is a real light bulb moment of the brilliance of the pair of them. How was that first championship experience for you?
Well, just going back to what you said initially and where Albie took us, All-Star B took us, he took us on such a journey from, as you say, from 2017 in the Europeans onwards. But yeah, absolutely thrilled to start with to get that call up. And when we walked the course, it was very, very slicey. It was very, very tight. Ros knew that she had to be always with Albie. She had to get out that start box and slightly be beyond that first minute, because it got stronger and more difficult to control the balance towards the end of the track. So we had to leave a little bit in hand. But absolutely Stragom, yes, it's backwards and forwards and tight turns. And I think Ros felt around that track that it was like a washing machine. She got thrown almost sort of forwards and backwards. It was very, very tricky. But I think that was one of the first times that she really rose to the pressure of a situation and knowing that she had to make something happen. And she did it in the absolute best way. It wouldn't have been pleasurable, but massive learned from it. But very, very tricky for a horse like Albie, because he's such a difficult horse to connect down through the gears. He suits the Badminton and Burghley, where he can run and jump and just balance at the appropriate times. But to shorten, jump, sprint, and then not hit the bridle so much that she can get him back was very, very tricky. So I think going into that competition was still a little bit of an unknown of whether she could produce the goods or not with him. So exciting. I remember crying as she came through across the finish line, that I was so relieved that they'd managed to cope with the situation.
It's a different dynamic, I think, when you get to a big championship. The pressure and everything just builds and builds and builds. It's something, but that by that point you'd seen a huge amount of through the youth teams and the junior teams that you'd worked with. Ros actually defies the trend in recent years that, plenty of the top riders that we see on British teams today have come through the sort of the pony junior young rider ranks. Yaz Ingham, for example, would be the perfect example of that, has been very prolific in all of those age group classes. Ros didn't go through those, and yet is brilliant in her own way under pressure, and has only become more brilliant, or it's certainly become more apparent how brilliant she is over the last few years. Having seen both firsthand and the different dynamic of coming through the junior youth programs and actually not coming through that system at all, what's your take on that and the differences that we might see?
I think that boils down to different personalities. I don't think that actually experiencing championships through youth will have any easier effect when you move up to the seniors. It's a great experience because you know exactly what's going to happen. You understand the whole dynamics of how it works. But I think it doesn't boil down to whether you've had the experience or not. I think it boils down to whether you're confident in your own system and you can shut out the outside and carry on working through. I've seen senior riders crumble a little bit, even when they've had lots of experience before. And I've seen youth riders that have been as cool as cucumber because they absolutely know that they're confident at what they can do. So I don't think it's really to do with whether they're used to it, because I don't think any amount of championships can still get you so prepared that you feel at ease at it. I think it's down to individual temperament, individual riders, whether they have got a system that they work with, they are confident with. I think that would answer your question.
I think that's really interesting. I think it's spot on. I think it's a fascinating insight into actually what it takes to be a top level competitor. You get a lot more tools in your toolbox, and you get different opportunities, and you have different experiences, and you can draw upon those experiences and work with lots of different people. But ultimately, the temperament of the rider in question and the sports person in question is really, really pivotal. What about that World Championship? Because it was just the fairy tale. I mean, it was just absolutely extraordinary. Going out to try on a first World Championships for Ros, and the British team were extremely, extremely strong. But the moment that she took the individual gold medal, I think first of all you knew she was on the podium because she was guaranteed a podium finish, and it sort of all hinged on Ingrid Klimke's round in the show jumping. And I think, was it the final fence that went something complete? I mean, it was a thriller of a story. What was that like, being on the inside? It's a story we've spoken about on the podcast. We've talked to Ros about it. We've heard about it. Plenty of us watched it and enjoyed it. But what was it actually like?
I mean, it was a surreal week with the weather conditions and everything that went on around it. It felt like a normal championships to start with, as in there wasn't anything extraordinary about it. But as the week sort of went on, and posted a good dressage and clear inside the time, and sort of you start to realise that you have a sort of slight fighting chance. It starts to get a little bit more nerve-wracking, and that's the point when actually, and Ros is brilliant at this, she actually stops thinking about it and will hide herself away and do something completely different, and not focus on anything other than just getting her brain into a slightly different place, and not over focusing on something. So what was it like? It was certainly on the show jumping the day. Obviously, we had that day off in between because of the typhoon. That was the time where actually that was great for Albie, just to have a little chill out and just loosen his muscles, and the horses went for a walk and just loosened off. But the following day, I mean, I would say that obviously Ros is under quite a lot of pressure naturally, but I felt myself under a little bit of pressure as well. It's about getting your timing right. And the first thing that I put my mind to was how long was each individual show jumping round, so I could get the timing absolutely right and not make any mistake on when we warmed up. It was very, very hot. You absolutely didn't need to be warming up sort of too early, because that would floor the horses. And it's a funny sort of thing, having an extra day in between, that didn't suit all horses as well. So, I mean, it's like yourself, if you've done something quite exerting, actually having a day off the following day, actually you sometimes feel a little bit even more achy. So it was important to get the horses loose, correct, and ready to jump. So getting the timing right, as soon as I knew exactly when we needed to warm him up, I had to keep Ros cool to not want to jump in too early. And myself had to be very brave not to jump too early, because we didn't want to get him prepped too early for the job. So I think we waited till 3 left to go before we started jumping, which was a really big, brave decision that I felt that I had to make, which gave us sort of around about 9 minutes. And yeah, he warmed up really, really well. She went in, and I think she rode the best round I think I've ever seen Ros jump. I mean, absolutely. I don't know about you, but I think it's one of the best rounds ever. It was flawless. And I often use it when we're talking about coaching the coaches, I often use that round. Even if it was anybody else's horse, I'd do the same, because I thought she rode absolutely brilliantly. Yeah.
It must be a real feeling as a coach. You've kind of, and this is as a coach, as an owner, as anybody in a support team, but ultimately as a coach, you send your rider, whatever level it may be, whether it's going into the Pony Club area show jumping championships, whether it is, the final day of badminton, whether it's the world championships, you send them into the ring. You can't do anything else. It's down to them. And actually, it's worse watching on the sidelines. Much, much harder, because you have to trust that they are able to deliver everything that you've talked about and kind of work towards in ultimately what is the next 90 seconds.
Absolutely. But again, I suppose if they've got their own system, their own way of their coping strategy when they go, I mean, the most difficult time, Nicole, is going from their last show jumping warm-up to their first one in the arena, going from, your move off from going in the collecting ring of the dressage to going down the centre line. That period of when you are going into the field of play and performing, that's when you've got to have a really good coping strategy. So it comes through to the horse in a way that he knows how to perform his job without any default from the rider. And I think, I won't bore you, but I put my training into three categories: training to learn, training to compete. But the really important bit is training to win. I say the important bit, but it is to elite riders, and it's how to deal with being slightly better than every other rider. And it is down to having a really good system that you stick with, and that you can cope with any outside interference that's going to possibly affect you. And it's a really important thing to bring into the training. So you've actually brought a little bit of competing into your homework at home. Very, very important.
I think that's a really good point, because actually they're the things that ultimately make or break the very top level performances. And you can the smallest of things can have fairly big implications, particularly when you get to elite level sport. The one thing that I think we can't go past and not talk about on this show is ultimately a horse who I think has been one of the most loved horses by so many people in the last sort of 6 or 8 years. He's just had the most extraordinary career, and we really, really sadly lost All Star B this year. How hard is that as an owner, as a coach, as a friend? You and Ros are extremely close and work together really, really closely to kind of experience all of the highs that you've had, but ultimately one of the biggest lows that you can experience in owning an event horse.
Yes, I mean, without a shadow of a doubt, it was exceptionally sad with and sad how it happened and everything. I mean, you can say, he went doing something that he really enjoyed, and he didn't have to really endure sort of later on in life standing in a field, and because he would have never have been a horse that would have liked to have just taken a retirement role in life. He didn't enjoy doing nothing at all, and that, I think, is what you've got to take from it, is the saving grace that although it was a very sad and very public thing to happen, and not necessarily good for our sport, but I think if he was going to go anyway, Nicole, I think Ros and I both thought that that's probably a better way to go than than having to make a decision later on in life when, the horse is probably a lot older. Yes.
And
Very
not
difficult,
necessarily
I think.
happy. The public side of things is really interesting because actually, the world we live in now, everything feels very public. Everybody has an opinion. They air that opinion on social media. And I think whether that is the circumstances with All Star B this summer and it being in a high profile event, or whether it be, a championship rider, whether it be a big performance at a 5-star, whatever it may be, everything nowadays is very public. Is that something that you, I guess, were aware of and dealt with, or is it something that you work with your young riders on how to kind of deal with those external pressures that they may face?
I think yes. Social media obviously is high on. Even if people don't like to admit it, is high on everybody's sort of outlook, I think. With the younger rider, I think potentially it's where riders can get their nerves from. So, when we talk about a rider getting nervous, one of the biggest things is the fear of underperforming, especially when, your peers are looking at you and watching you, and the what could possibly be the backlash from the social media side of it. So, we try and encourage, or I try and encourage the riders that I work with to really almost ignore and actually not pick up their phone during a day of competing, or any point when it might affect how and what they're going to think. So keeping themselves completely free from it when they're performing is really very important. And then how they deal with it afterwards is very difficult. And I think if there are some comments on social media, I think the toughest thing a rider can do is actually just slightly ignore it and switch it off, because it's going to be gnawing away at them. But it is so important because it can have that sort of debilitating effect on them. So top priorities would be, whilst it's going to affect their mental state of mind when they're performing, the important thing is to steer very, very clear from it. And also, from a rider's point of view, I would really encourage sort of minimal social media interaction. I think that's so important. It is a great tool for promoting yourself and business, but yes, can be very, very difficult.
It's a double-edged sword at times, isn't it?
Absolutely. It was overwhelming, really, with All Star B, the amount of people that commented on the post that got put up straight away. And Ros and I both found that so many people who, we didn't know at all were, sending their love and their condolences. And yes, it was a very, very moving period of time. Yes. And I think Ros received lots of flowers, and it was a really interesting time to go through. Yes.
What about outside of equestrian sport for you? Because am I right in saying that you would be a very keen diver? And I always find it interesting because horses are so all consuming, aren't they? Talk to me about kind of the escapism from horses and what diving gives you.
Yes, I started diving probably about 8 or 9 years ago. Just really from the first time ever putting my head underwater and seeing all the pretty fish, I was absolutely sort of gobsmacked with the world that's down there. So in true Caroline fashion, I decided to, really take it up properly, not just happy with doing a little bit of scuba diving in Egypt or somewhere. I took it up, and actually the Chris who taught me to dive is now married to Ros. So
okay.
That's how it all came to, my little matchmaking scheme.
So did you learn to dive with Chris and then set him up with Ros?
That's right. So probably in my first year of learning to dive, I said to Roz, "Hey, you've got to try this." And Roz very easily took to it much easier than I did. Quickly got her paddy, and then I said, "Right, you're coming to Tenerife with me, and we're going diving on a diving club holiday." And yes. So that's where really the romance started, I think, or came from there.
Amazing. There is, and then the rest, as they say, is history, and there's a child and marriage and everything else.
Exactly. But yes, I absolutely love the thrill of diving. So as soon as I had finished my paddy and done a little bit of got a bit of experience, I started doing some technical diving. And now, I absolutely adore it. So I've got sort of three areas that I do a bit of diving in. I either do quite a lot of wreck diving, and I go down to sort of 70, 80 meters with a what they call a rebreather, which is where your air circulates round. Or we go and do a little bit of diving with the sharks, and that's absolutely amazing. I love doing that. It's great fun.
There are so many ways that I could think of describing diving with sharks, and amazing and great fun were not the two initial ones, Caroline, that popped into my mind. Terrifying and mad. That's
because of Jaws.
Exactly. That sounds really intimidating. Obviously.
Oh, it's amazing. It's thrilling, and I think that's really important. You have to have something that scares you every day. But I certainly I absolutely love it. It's really, really great fun. And I try and do as much as I possibly can in between anything we're doing with the events. Yes.
Amazing. Love hearing different hobbies, and definitely didn't know about the Roz and Chris story, and that's how it all came about. I can imagine Roz being very, very talented at any sport that she kind of turns her hand to, though, and just sort of picking it up and running with it.
And she wants to be the best at everything she does. And
yes, absolutely. What about now? Because it's been a tough year for you. You were diagnosed with cancer earlier this year. How has that changed your mindset? And how has it changed your mindset? I should say, I shouldn't presume that it has.
I mean, gosh, it certainly makes you look at life slightly differently, in the way that, you feel like you want to get everything out of life. I mean, I make little rules like I'm never going to get annoyed about anything. I'm going to smile to everybody, and I want to enjoy every moment that I do. It certainly stopped me working quite so hard, because if anybody knows me, I was very, very much a workaholic. And it stopped me doing sort of 12 hours teaching every day, 7 days a week. So that's been a really positive thing, because it actually made me slow down just very slightly. And I just finished writing a book that just literally has gone to the publisher yesterday. So that was quite good fun. So I fitted that in around other things this year as well. So yes, it's it just makes you sort of stop, think, and look at life in a slightly different way, but makes you really want to get everything out of life, I think. Yes.
I think that's a very good point. I love that you just dropped in there that you just, you're not quite so much of a workaholic, but you just wrote a book. What's the book about? When will it be out? How can we find it?
It'll be out around about the end of May, June time, I think, called Training to Win. And it's about taking a horse really from its sort of 4-year-old sort of year towards up to sort of 4-star stroke 5-star. So it takes the rider on a sort of journey of taking them through their absolute basics to all the skills they need in competition, to being, the best and the to produce a high performance in everything that they do. And it covers sort of how to become a champion in your own mindset and having a podium mentality and all sorts of things. So it's quite I think it will be a good book to be able to pick up and put down and just use with different horses, but also hopefully will take the rider through a bit of a journey of taking that horse up to sort of a top level.
I always love the insight into books such as that, and that kind of the journey is that, because even from somebody personally who isn't going to take a horse through a 4-year-old up to 5-star level, everyone will be delighted to know that's not going to happen, listeners. But actually, even just there, you sort of mentioned the mindset and the championship kind of insight and the mental aspect of it. Even getting an insight into that, I think we can all learn so much from getting a look at sort of what makes people tick and what gives them the edge and how they're thinking about things and analysing things. And actually, we can apply that in other parts of our life as well. It's something that we can really kind of pick little tiny things out of and really apply them to ourselves, as well as, of course, following the journey through too. One of the things that you are doing and looking to do, and it's obviously a cause very close to your heart, and I have to admit personally it's something very, very close to my heart as well, is raising money for cancer research. So just tell us about that and what you're doing and how people, if they're listening to this, might be able to get involved.
Yes, so it's thanks really to Sarah Charnley, who instigated it initially. But we took some of All Star B's tail and made that into the most superb silver braided bracelets. A lady called Sue Davis from Creation Jewellery in Lincolnshire. So sort of I financed having those all made, and then I'd like to sell them for cancer research. So we're looking to sort of put those out sale very, very shortly. But yes, they're the most beautiful bracelets. I have one, Ros and Sarah has one as well, and we've got 12 to sell. So they will come up, I think, through Horse and Hound, and also it will come forward on social media as well, on Facebook, yes.
And there'll be a chance to have a small part of an absolutely legendary horse, but also in a very, very good cause. I've seen one of the bracelets, actually. I saw one at Burley, and they are beautiful. They're really, really delicate, very beautiful, and feel really quite emotional as well. There's that real sort of tangible feeling around it. Listeners, if you want to support or you're interested in one of the bracelets, then what we'll do is we'll share it across our social media channels as well when it comes out. It is a very, very worthy cause. So even if it isn't something that you're able to get your hands on, you might be able to just give a little bit that might make a bit of a difference to somebody down the line. Caroline, it has been an absolutely fascinating insight into your career and to sort of what has taken you to this part of your journey. And I honestly could sit and talk to you. I've got questions bubbling inside me as to things that we could talk about and directions in which we could go. But you've been so generous with your time. So thank you so much for coming on the show and for talking to us. It's been a really, really interesting insight. And listeners, I hope you guys have enjoyed it as well. But Caroline, thank you.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
There you go, listeners. One of the greatest coaches on British soil and a little insight into how it all comes together. We have got lots more in store for you on the Equratings Eventing podcast over the next couple of months. Coming up to the end of the year, we will, of course, be reviewing the whole of 2022. We've got some tricks up our sleeve for Christmas as well, so you won't want to miss it. A big thank you, as always, to Bedmax for their support of the show, and we'll be back very soon with more. But for now, a big thank you to Caroline, and we'll be back with more on the Equratings Eventing podcast.